Now we will move on to graphics for numerical data. For numerical data, we're going to visualize the data using a histogram. A histogram displays the density of the data. We often also call the density the distribution of the data. Okay, it's showing us the distribution of all of the data points. And so we're going to use the hist function in R to accomplish this. And let's go ahead and run this in Markdown real quickly so that we can see what this code will look like in the next section. Okay, I'm just going to run the whole chunk so that I can see both. Once again, I'm going to get an error because I haven't defined weight gain yet. All right, so let's scroll back up. Again, this is something that you would have done previously if we'd opened this the previous class period. Since I didn't run my Markdown file from the beginning, I need to go ahead and run the chunk from section 2.4 where I define my weight gain variable right here. So now I've defined weight gain, and I can scroll back down to 2.7. And when I click on run, I'm going to see that they show up. Okay, I'll pause real quick to say when you get errors like this in R, don't freak out, okay? Red means that something didn't run correctly, but you want to make sure to read the error to give you a clue as to what happened. Okay, so when I read this error, it says the object W gain was not found. So that's telling me, and it also highlights it, when it looks for this word, it doesn't know what this word means. And so I realized to myself, oh, I haven't created this variable in R yet. So I need to go back and create the variable before the code's going to work. All right, if I run this chunk now, it's going to output, and I get two different histograms. They look a little similar, but I can see that the size of the bars differs. And so when we look at our notes, we have the code breaks equal to sequence from 0 to 200 by 5. That's telling me how wide I want these bars to be that show up in my histogram. Okay, so down here I can see between 0 and 50, I've only got 5 bars, so each one has a width of 10, right? Versus over here, I now have 10 bars in that range, and so each bar has a width of 5, okay? So in a histogram, I can change the width of my bin, and basically what I'm doing is taking all of the data points that fall in that range and dumping them into a bin and counting how many there are, okay? So in this case, I end up with two different ways of viewing the histogram with different bin widths, and I could change my bin width to whatever I want. So I want you to pause right now and try to answer these discussion questions before moving on. Okay, I'm going to assume that you have paused and attempted these on your own before I go over the answers. So again, if you haven't, pause, try to answer them yourself. That's going to be the best way to make sure you understand before we keep going. All right, about how many women gained between 20 and 30 pounds? The answer to that is about 800. Okay, and I can see that in this first histogram because the first bar would be 0 to 10, the second bar would be 10 to 20, and the third bar is 20 to 30. So this bar up here is my 20 to 30 pound weight gain. Again, this is looking at data about women's pregnancies and seeing how much weight did they gain during their pregnancy. And if I look at the height of that bar, it goes over to about 800. So that's telling me I have 800 women in the category of gaining 20 to 30 pounds. The next question about how many women gained between 25 and 30 pounds is about 500. So for that, I'm asking for a group just between 25 and 30, so that's a bin width of 5, so the second graph is going to be a better place to look. That ends up being this highest bar right here, which goes over to about 500. And if you actually tried the code where you're using the breaks only going from 0 to 100 by 5, you get an error. And the reason for this is that we have data points beyond 100. We have data points beyond the value of 100. Okay, so if I look at my graph, if I had tried to stop the bin width at a value of 100, there aren't many data points over here, but there are some there. And so there would be nowhere for those data points to go if I tell it that I want the breaks to only go up to 100. So I'm going to get an error that says that's not going to work. You need to make sure that your sequence goes high enough to include all of the data. right, that's a basic introduction to histograms, and we'll talk a little bit more about how to interpret them later on in the packet.